Right, good morning. This is just a quick video to go through how to submit Houdini mantra jobs onto the render farm. So I've put together this quick checklist. So what I'll do is I'll just work through it and hopefully that's going to make sense to you and it'll work for you. So step one, copy the HIP file and all data to the render space. So what you should have on your desktop is a shortcut to the render space. So if I just open that up, yours might be empty, mine's got lots of tests and things I've been playing around with in terms of rendering. The project I'm going to use for this demo is this wires. So if I go into there, I'll just delete some of these. That's from setting things up earlier. I don't actually need them. Now what I've copied on here is my HIP file. Notice it's HIP NC, non-commercial. It doesn't matter if it's non-commercial, it'll still work fine. The render farm doesn't actually use Houdini itself, it uses Mantra in isolation, so we can use non-commercial files. I've got a geo folder. In there is all my cache data, everything I need for this scene to render. I've also got my textures, just one texture. So everything's copied to the render space, and that's your first step. So moving on, we now need to check that all file paths are relative to the HIP directory. So to do that we need to go into Houdini. Let's just open up the scene that I've just copied across. So file, open, and it's this one. Just navigate to your to the render space that and to the file you've just copied up there. I'll open that. I should say apologies in advance. I'm using a new screen capture bit of software and I'm struggling with it, to be honest. So what have we got in my scene? You should have something similar to this. You should have some geometry data, the stuff you're going to render, whether that's just polygons like this, it might be smoke, it might be particles, who knows. I've got two lights, an environment light and a spotlight, and I've got a camera. This is just to animate the camera, just spins it around a little bit. So I need to check what we're doing. Check all file paths are relative to the HIP directory. So I've only got two file paths I need to worry about. You might have a lot more. The two I need to worry about are my cache geo. So that's where that's my scene itself. It's these wires that are animated or simulated rather and cached out. Now it is loading from disk, that's correct, and it's loading from somewhere called $hip /geo / and then all these funny words. Now the $hip just means the current location of the HIP file. Now you can see at the top here the current location is SCM render, my user ID, wires. If I middle click on this field, you can see it translates it to exactly the same location. Then it's looking in a folder called geo, and if I go to, where's my geo, and these are all my cache files, 1 to 600. Now all this, these are also the default naming conventions for Houdini cache files, so they'll probably be okay for you. Just to explain, the HIP name is the name of the HIP file, so in this case it's grain wire dance. $OS is the name of the node that this string lives in, so in this case it's cache geo. $F is the current frame, so 143, and then that's just the file type, a compressed geometry file. Again, if I middle click, you can see, just scroll across. So that's $hip name, just the name of the file. Cache geo is the name of this node. 143, because I'm on frame 143, and then bgeo source. So that's okay, that's all relative, it's looking on the render space, so that should work fine. If it's not looking on the render space, just middle click. If you get anything about C drives or D drives, it's not going to work. The other thing to check is my textures. Now I've only got one texture in here, and that's attached to this environment light. and there it is. It's one of the default Houdini textures. Now this again is looking at SCM render, wires, texture, Dosh skies. Now by default you might be using one of the Houdini pick files. Now this is the one I'm using. Now if you just load it in like that, by default it's going to point to the C drive. Now that won't work. Obviously the render farm can't access the C drive on a local machine. It can only access the render space, or I think your U drive as well, but stick to the render space. So if it is pointing there, just make sure you go and find this file. Again, you can just browse using that. Copy it onto the render space in your textures folder, or it doesn't have to be called textures, it can be called anything. And then just make sure it's referencing that locally. So that's both my both my file maps sorted out. I shall Control S just to save that once I'm happy with it. And let's go back to the checklist. So I've done that one. I'm going to perform a local test render. So let's have a look. To do that, we're going to go to the out context, and I've already got a mantra node in there, but I'll create a new one. So just hit tab, mantra, and I want to render all the frames. Actually, I probably don't, but I'll change that in a minute. Now, just for this little test, I'm just going to override the camera resolution. Rather than wasting time doing a perfect render, let's just do a quick and dirty one. You probably need to go in and play with the pixel samples. There should be at least 5, probably more. It depends on what your scene's like. Yeah, let's just go with that, see what it does. So I'm going to go to the render tab, give myself a bit more room. Choose the node I'm using, which is Mantra 2 this time, because I've just changed it. My camera is camera 1, and click render. Now notice it says generating scene up there. I'll talk about that in a minute. And as long as this looks about right, then I'm just going to go with it. And if you hold down the mouse button, you can focus in on one particular area. And you can see it's quite a rough render, but like I said, for the sake of speed, I'm just going to go with it. Let's stop that. So let's say I'm happy with my local render now. Let's move that across. Let's go back to the checklist. So perform local test render. Yes, that worked brilliantly. Next, I'm going to write my IFD files to disk. So the IFD files are essentially scene descriptions. They hold camera, light information, and they also reference geometry. Now, an IFD file is something that Mantra can read. You'll notice when I clicked render, if I just do it again, if I click render, you'll see it says generating scene. At that point, it's actually creating IFD files on the fly before Mantra can render them. But usually that happens in the background and they get deleted before you notice they're there. So to create IFD files, we've got to change our settings a bit. I don't want to do 600 frames because that'll take ages. So I'm just going to delete channels and say 5 frames. That'll do. Obviously, you need to make sure that's as many frames as you've got. I'm just going for 5 to keep things fast. And the main thing is to go to the driver tab. And by default, the command is Mantra because it's a Mantra render. I'm going to click on this tab, this checkbox, and change the driver to a disk file. So it's going to write out something called mantra.ifd to the HIP file location. So again, middle click and you can see where it's writing to. Now I've got to change this a little bit. I want it to write to a directory called ifd, just to keep things organized. And I don't want to call it Mantra because that doesn't really mean a lot. I'll call it Wire Dance because that's what this scene is about. And then I need to do a $F capital F. And again, if I middle click there, it'll tell you what it's going to do. It's going to create a disk. Sorry, it's going to write a file to disk, and this is the location. wiredance.143 because I'm on 143 frame. .ifd. Cool. And that's pretty much it. It's also going to write out some data to storage. Again, that's on the render space, so that's fine. Once you've done that, just click render to disk. It'll go off and start writing data to disk. And this data is all that Mantra needs to render a frame. It doesn't actually need the scene file, doesn't need the HIP or anything else. It just needs IFDs. So let's have a look, see what it created. So it's in there. You'll notice we've got a few new folders now. We've got a backup, which is nice. I guess that's just backing up my scene. Yep. We've got an IFD, which should be 5 frames in there, or 5 IFDs. You can open these in Notepad if you want. You see it sort of, it's a little, oops, resize that a bit. And you can see it sort of has lots of data in there. Whew. It is possible to edit these, but I wouldn't recommend it. And it's also created an IFDS folder. And this is where all the geometry lives. So you can see it's going to be quite large depending on your scene. I've got 5 frames for the animated character, and I've got one geo for the, I presume it's the background because the background never changes. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of the IFD stuff. So let's go to Cube now and submit a frame, just a 1 test frame. Let's see if we can get this rendered. So I'm going to go to submit Houdini simple command Houdini mantra job, and should bring up this window. So quickly going through this, give it a meaningful name. So wire dance test, obviously call it something meaningful to you. Instances, I'm only going to render 1 frame, so I'm going to just use 1 instance. The range, I'm just going to do 1 frame. I'll do frame 5. The only other bit of data I need to put in is the IFD file. So I need to tell it where it is. So I'll click Browse. Go to, where are we? Render space, wires, IFD. Let's choose that one. Now if I leave it like this, it'll just render frame 1. So I need to change this to something Cube understands, and that is QB frame number. So I'm just going to copy that. Control C, oops, where are we? And then here, paste it. So QB frame number is just a cube variable, and it just takes the current frame and plonks it in there. So it'll, if I've asked it to render frame 5, it'll look for wiredance.5.ifd, and obviously that's the where are we? This file. So going back to, hang on, too many windows. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing I'd probably say you need to play with is go down to expert mode and scroll down to reservations, and you might just need to have a few more processors depending on the complexity of your job. I tend to go for, let's click on that. I'm just going to give this 4. Now the maximum number you can have there is 12. I wouldn't recommend going for 12 just because if that reserves an entire machine. If you look at my previous videos, it explains what the numbers here mean. I would go for some sort of something divisible, something that 12 is divisible by. So if I say 4, it means I can have 3 jobs running on 1 machine. If I go for, so obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, all nicely divisible. And that should be it. Let's just click submit. So it's currently set to pending. Click refresh. You can see it's running. Let's click refresh again. Now, oops, it's failed. Now this is a common problem. I'd like to say I did it deliberately. I just forgot again. You could check what's gone wrong here. It's where is it? It should tell me. There it is. It's saying it can't find this file, SCM render, and you can see it's taken out all the slashes from the path. So we need to amend our path a little bit. So I'm going to right click on the job. Cube is it's very, very slow to respond to right clicks, so you've got to wait a little bit while. Go to resubmit. And what I need to do is change this path and add extra backslashes. So there should all be double backslashes. We may get this fixed soon. It's we can write scripts just to insert these automatically, but for now just put double backslashes in. And I'll resubmit again. And if I click refresh, hopefully this time it'll run successfully. Now this should render very quickly because I've got very low settings. Now unfortunately on this new video recording software I don't know how to pause the recording. It doesn't seem to allow me to. So I'm just going to have to wait for this to finish rendering. What we should notice in the on the render space now, under the render directory, you should see the files getting written. So you can see here it's writing frame 5 out. Oops. Still writing it. Always up to 5. Let's just keep refreshing. There we go, finished. So it didn't take too long. 55 seconds to do that frame. And let's go back to our checklist. Finally, once you're happy, well, I suppose the first thing you need to do is just go back to go to your render and just check that this looks okay. So it's a .exr file by default. I'll just open it up in Photoshop. It's just, hang on, where are you? There it is. Like I say, it's not a very pretty render, but I did ask for very low settings, so let's assume I'm happy with that. So at this point I've done my test frame. Now I can go back and do all my frames. So to do that I'm just going to right click on wire dance again. Again, you've got to wait a while, it's bizarrely slow. Go to resubmit. And the idea of resubmit is just saves you typing all this stuff in again. And I'm going to say frames 1 to 5 and increase the instances to 5 because I'm doing 5 frames. Now we have limited the number of instances to 20, so even if I was doing 500 frames and I asked for 500 instances, that number is going to get dropped down to 20. It's the maximum we can handle. It's just to keep the render farm free for lots of people to use. I don't actually have 500 frames because I've only written out 5 IFDs. And then once you change this frame range, just click resubmit. Notice I asked for 500 instances, but it's only given me 5 because it detected that that's all I needed. And they're all off rendering. So I think that's it. I won't wait for that to finish. If you have any problems, just come and find me. I'm sure I can help you out. Mantra is new on the farm this year, so we may have some teething problems, but up to now it seems to be rendering fine with all types of geometry. Okay, thanks very much.